Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little interesting topic, at least that I found very particularly interesting. I was just watching a video by this one channel overall named Mr. AKHi TV, or just AKHi TV when it comes down to it. And for those of you, of course, that have watched my channel, for those of you that maybe have stuck around for the long haul, or maybe all in all, you're more recent to my channel, you know that sometimes I tend to review videos that may be by certain channels, especially the channels that I tend to find biased and non-objective and, basically trying to promote certain narratives. And basically when it comes down to it, one of these channels out there that I do think overall tries to do this is Mr. AKHi TV. Whenever it comes to a sport, or really whenever it comes to anything in general, I think that it's very, very important to be logical and objective, to be very analytical, all in all, to a degree, to take things into context. And I think all in all, it's important to read someone to the point to where you know if their intentions are basically to come off as true and overall pure, or someone all in all that is somewhat logical and objective, someone that actually knows what they're talking about, and someone basically that is just feeding you a whole bunch of lies. And it's no offense against a certain amount of these channels, but it's been very hard for me to really almost even get a little bit of a shred of respect for a certain amount of these channels, because I can just tell that a lot of the shit that they say, there's no way that they 100% truly believe in some of the things that they say. Gervonta Davis, of course, he recently has announced that he is going to have a fight, I believe, with Mr. Rolando Romero, or Rolly Romero, whatever his name may be. Rolly Romero, of course, for those of you that don't know who he is an undefeated, I believe, interim champion or something of a sort at the 135-pound division. And Gervonta Davis, basically, he is going to have a comeback fight. Of course, he did injure his left hand, I believe, in that last fight against Mr. Isaac Pitbull Cruz. So I wouldn't necessarily have the biggest problem with this fight happening next if you were to maybe phrase it in that sense and basically say, well, Mr. Gervonta Davis, this isn't the worst comeback fight available. Even though, in my personal opinion, if you were to ask me about this fight, I don't think that this is a good fight at all. I don't think that it's a good matchup. I think that the only thing that maybe would get this fight some decent numbers, if it even is going to do decent numbers, is the fact all in all that Rolly Romero and Gervonta Davis, they seem to have a little bit of a history. Rolly Romero, of course, talks a hot game. He's a very big trash talker. But it's no offense against Mr. Rolly Romero. I have no gripe with him or anything like that, but he really has he really has no actual chance against Gervonta Davis. And it's so funny because these are the same exact channels, these LDBC and new media channels, they try to allege basically that certain fighters that they of course don't like and that they hate, and they basically try to tear down mainly because of their demographics, such as a Canelo Alvarez. We all know overall that they don't like him and that their main job has been to try to tear down his brand overall, for him not to be the number one pound for pound fighter. And what do they always say about certain fighters like Canelo Alvarez? What do they always say about certain people like Canelo or Vasily Lomachenko or Tyson Fury or Alexander Usyk? But especially Canelo Alvarez. And this is why I can't take a lot of these channels seriously. Because like I said, I'm basically a person where if you're going to hold one person, no matter what demographic or no matter who they be, if you're going to hold overall, under certain contexts, of course, but when it comes down to it, if more than likely, if you're going to hold one person to one standard, you have to hold another one to that same exact standard. So if you're going to be one of these channels like that of a Dante's Boxing Nation, an AKHi TV, a Boxing Ego, and you're going to go on your show, or you're going to go on your platform, your channel, whatever you want to call it, and basically say with certain fighters like a Canelo Alvarez, and basically say, oh, well, I think that Canelo Alvarez is avoiding black elite fighters. I think that he's avoiding Mexican elite fighters. He's not facing anyone. Basically what they do is that they make excuses no matter who Canelo Alvarez fights, even if they are legitimate champions. When he fought a certain amount of people, they said, oh, they were just these weak European fighters, or he fights people off their worst performances. He does this, he does that. But yet when you take a look at Canelo Alvarez's statistics in his last fight against that of Caleb Plant, for Caleb Plant allegedly just being the C-class white guy, as many people overall always try to allege him to be, the pay-per-view did over 900,000 buys. So how is it that Canelo Alvarez in his last pay-per-view, when he fought allegedly a complete bum, he did over 900,000 pay-per-view buys? If Floyd Mayweather Jr. even fought someone that was looked at as a C-class fighter, he would not even do over 900,000 pay-per-view buys. Unless it was someone like a Conor McGregor, who, of course, has very, very much a claim in another sport. But if it was someone overall that was a highly ranked boxer or someone that was a decent boxer, let's say that a Floyd Mayweather Jr., let's say that during his career he would have fought someone, say like a Victor Postal, someone who in my opinion was never a bum, but someone who never was really elite either. Do you think that pay-per-view would have did 900,000 pay-per-view buys? I highly doubt it. Now, is that me trying to say that, or say that Canelo Alvarez is the bigger star than what Floyd Mayweather Jr. was? No, that's not what I'm trying to say. My point being is this. For these channels, very, very hard trying to allege that Canelo Alvarez, that his numbers are sinking and that he's failing and he's not taking the fights that a lot of people want to see. Well, for him allegedly not taking the fights that a lot of people want to see, his numbers certainly show different. And that's why, when it came with that Gervonta Tank Davis fight last time against Isaac Pitbull Cruz, they would never talk about the pay-per-view numbers. And basically what was Boxing Ego and AKHi TV and these idiots, these pro-racial idiots, when it comes down to what were they saying? Why are you pocket watching? Why are you worried about the money that he gets? Why are you worried about that? Well, you certainly have no problem overall bitching and complaining overall about Canelo and the alleged numbers that he gets. Boxing Ego is the same dude all in all. And this is why I don't have any respect for these channels. Because either you're a shill when it comes down to it, or you have to be one of the biggest hypocrites. I mean, either way, you're probably both. It just is what it is. Because there's no way that, the majority of the stuff that they're saying they actually truly believe. Because they literally say one thing 1 minute and they'll say a completely different thing the next. They basically have overall no morals. They have no soul. They're pretty much overall a shill or overall a mercenary. Basically overall, for those of you that have ever, for those of you that have ever played video games, or for those of you that have ever watched that one series of Chronicles of Riddick, Riddick overall, he would always say about the mercenaries, or the bounty hunter, that basically he has no soul. That overall, he basically has no spine, he has no heart. He's just basically, a piece of plastic, or basically he's just someone that is a shill. He's a sellout. It just is what it is. That's what I consider overall someone to be a sellout. When basically you'll say anything, you're a hypocrite, you have no morals, you have no soul. And that's basically overall what a certain amount of these guys are. It just is what it is. Because when it comes to someone like a Gervonta Tank Davis, how could you legitimately overall think that a Gervonta Tank Davis versus Rolly Romero fight is actually something that would be more competitive than that of a Caleb Plant versus a Canelo Alvarez fight? So when they try to actually compare, and you hear these guys, Dante's Boxing Nation, and you hear some of these other guys that say, oh, well, Canelo, he's only facing these C-grade white fighters. Well, those alleged C-grade white fighters, some of them have better wins overall in their career than certainly what a Isaac Pitbull Cruz or a Rolly Romero would have. I mean, let's just be real. There's a reason why Gervonta Tank Davis's last, pay-per-view, why it tanked. Nobody watched that shit. Nobody watched that shit. No one ever came out with the pay-per-view numbers. You know why? Because it tanked. It tanked. That's the main reason overall. Why? Because no one watched that shit. Nobody wanted to see Gervonta Tank Davis versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz, who's a good fighter, but he's just not a great fighter. Now, of course, that also attests a little bit to Gervonta Tank Davis, because a lot of people, whether they like to admit it or not, he is a great talent. He is a person that looks to be a great fighter. But to be on the all-time great level, you have to prove yourself. And to be within that top 5 pound per pound, you are going to have to prove yourself eventually. Whether that comes against Vasily Lomachenko, whether that comes against Josh Taylor, whether that comes against Jose Ramirez, Regis Prograis, Teofimo Lopez, Ryan Garcia, although I don't really consider him high level, but he is talented. Whether it come against, a few others, George Kambosos, Devin Haney, whoever else it may come across, Montana Love, whoever it may come across, Gervonta Tank Davis eventually is going to have to prove himself. And this is basically overall, why I said that in certain videos of mine, when people overall try to criticize someone like a Canelo Alvarez and try to come up with these narratives, and I'm not someone that's a Canelo Alvarez fan. I'm just a person that I take a look at these narratives and I just think that they're absolutely ridiculous. If you're a person that, all in all, you're going to criticize someone like a Canelo for apparently facing guys that he legitimately knows that he can just beat 100% of the time, how can you really allege that? And then with Gervonta Tank Davis, you say that he's facing legitimate competition. How does Isaac Pitbull Cruz really have a legitimate chance of beating Gervonta Tank Davis, at least looking from overall that perspective? Isaac Pitbull Cruz has never even been a legitimate champion in his career. How does Rolly Romero, or Rolando Romero, whatever you want to call this young man, how does this dude really have a legitimate chance over Gervonta Tank Davis? Now, of course, if you really wanted to frame it, and if you wanted to sugarcoat it, if you really overall wanted to polish that turd golden and turn it into something that is not, you can basically say, oh, well, Rolly Romero, he's someone that has a lot of power. He's very awkward. And all in all, he's someone that, it's entertaining. Yeah, sure, it might be slightly entertaining for those of you or for those of us that maybe were interested in maybe a little bit of a barking match when it comes down to it, and we just want to see one of these guys get shut up. But for those of us overall that are boxing purists and we understand all in all, who actually is the better fighter, this isn't really that interesting of a fight. I'm sorry, but this just doesn't interest me whatsoever. That's not me saying that maybe I will not get the fight because I still want to do a breakdown and all in all, do a little bit of a fight review. But when it comes down to it, is this a fight that I really take a look at and I say, wow, this is really a 50-50 fight. This is really a fight that I'm super duper excited for? No, it's not. No, it's not. A fight, in my opinion, doesn't always necessarily have to be the biggest of fan favorites for a fight to be a great fight. I think that the Canelo Alvarez versus Dimitri Bivol fight is a great fight. And I think, to be honest with you, that more people, of course, would have wanted the Charlo or David Benavidez fights. But I personally would have preferred the Dimitri Bivol fight. Why is that? Because I know who Dimitri Bivol actually is. Dimitri Bivol is an actually legitimate threat. It just is what it is. So when it comes down to it, like I said, I have no problem overall with that fight happening because Dimitri Bivol, I know, is actually going to be somewhat of good competition no matter the result. Even if Canelo Alvarez somehow dominates in the fight, we know that if Canelo wins that fight, it's a very impressive, spot on his resume. Because Dimitri Bivol is a legitimate threat. But what does beating Rolly Romero really mean? You beat someone that basically has never won an official belt in his career. You beat someone that really has no skills whatsoever, no footwork, no overall, not great, punching accuracy when it comes down to. Sure, he's very, very strong, but what does that really mean? I mean, come on. Gervonta Davis, when you take a look at him, it's very clear that he's an excellent talent. I don't think that there's any denying that. I think that he is, maybe even a debatable top 10 pound for pound fighter. But listen, dude, I don't know overall what fight Gervonta Davis is on, but I believe all in all that it's in the mid-20s. He's starting to get to that 30th fight percentile, or overall, that 30th fight mark. It's about time, all in all, that you start facing someone that is actually a legitimate challenge. Now, I'll give you a little bit of credit for beating Jose Pedraza and, beating overall of, Mr. Leo Santa Cruz. But those fighters, in my opinion, are not on the same level as what some of the other fighters out there that you could possibly face. They're not on the same level as a Devin Haney, a Vasily Lomachenko. They're not on the same level as some of those guys. It just is what it is. And there's even other fighters that you could potentially face that, in my opinion, would be great fights for yourself as well. Josh Taylor, Jose Ramirez, Regis Prograis, Gary Antoine Russell, that one dude at 140 who I believe is the little brother of Gary Russell Jr. You could fight any one of those guys. But instead, this is the next fight that we're getting. So like I said, when you see these channels, when it comes down to it, basically, saying all this shit about Canelo Alvarez, and I get these certain people overall saying, well, overall, you got to understand, they're speaking facts about Canelo because, they just want to see Canelo Alvarez face better competition. So why are you bitching and moaning on a daily basis, almost no matter whoever Canelo Alvarez fights? But Gervonta Davis can face two people in a row who weren't even champions. And apparently, all in all, you're okay with both of those fights happening. And you even go as far to say, all in all, that those are greater fights than what Canelo Alvarez is taking. You can't even compare the level of competition within the past few fights that Canelo has fought to Gervonta Davis. It's not even close. It's not even close. You can't compare someone unless you're talking about a Virgil Ortiz or a Jerome Butzenis, because, of course, there are certain fighters out there that really haven't won a belt, and we have to take things into context, and we know that they're great talents. But does anyone take a look at Isaac Pitbull Cruz and say, oh my God, he's going to be a multiple weight division champion? No one takes a look at Mr. Isaac Pitbull Cruz like that. No one takes a look at him like that. He's a stepping stone. It's no offense against Isaac Pitbull Cruz, but he's not a great fighter. He's a good fighter. He's not a great fighter. Does anyone take a look at Rolly Romero or Rolando Romero as someone that is really an A great fighter? I don't even think that he's a B grade fighter. I think that he has great athleticism. I think that he has very good power. But his boxing skill set is all over the goddamn place. You can't tell me all in all that this dude actually has a legitimate chance. If your opponent does not even have at least a 30% chance, then in my opinion, basically what that fight means is that it is a mismatch. Canelo Alvarez, when he fought Caleb Plant, there was at least some sort of mystique or some wonder about how is Canelo Alvarez overall going to handle this type of style. Yes, Caleb Plant is not a person that is known for the greatest amount of power, but he is a person all in all that was bigger, lankier than Canelo Alvarez. He was a person that had some very, very decent wins in his career over Caleb Truax, and especially that great win over Jose Uzcategui, who more than likely was probably using PEDs at the time. So it is what it is. So Caleb Plant was a legitimate threat. He was a person that was looked at as a very high skilled fighter. He was looked at as a person, even on some lists like Champside, for example. Champside at one point in time had Caleb Plant on his top 10 pound for pound list. But then as soon as Canelo Alvarez overall fought him, all of a sudden the praise for Caleb Plant, they started to go out the window because they did not want Canelo Alvarez to be on top. So like I said, for some of these guys that come to my channel and they say, oh, well, you're just wrong about Dante and all these guys are shills. They're shills. It is what it is. They have no morals. When it comes to they have no morals, they will say whatever they need to say overall to get their point across, or overall basically their narrative across. And they don't really care overall how it sounds. So it is what it is. But anyways, I just thought that I would talk about that because I thought that would be very particularly interesting. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.